I've noticed that a lot of people these days pride themselves on the fact that they're very secretive, and the fact that no one could ever know what's going on in their life because they never tell a single person anything. And I feel like I've always been confused by this a lot, for a very long time, because I feel like if you are if you've got a really close circle, or if you've got really good friends, you guys cannot be close enough, you guys can't know each other enough to the point where you can't know each other enough, because there's certain barriers that require vulnerability to build, to break down, if that makes sense. And I feel like certain levels of friendship can't be elevated to until there is a bond of vulnerability. And I feel like this is also the reason why a lot of people, in relationships or in bad situations in their life, they don't have the right people around them to go to, and that leads to things where it's toxic relationships, abusive relationships, domestic abuse, all of that kind of thing, because a lot of people just don't want someone else. Maybe it's because they don't want someone else to think that they have a bad life, so they want to maintain this image. But I also think it's just because of the fact that people like the idea of I'm suffering a lot and I'm still able to keep it to myself, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've always thought it's really strange, because I don't think personally that I could call myself you my close friend, because I do know that I've had friends in the past where it's that have this kind of trait, and I just find it slightly confusing, because I think these are the kind of people that also think it's very weak to be vulnerable, and I don't like that mindset, because I feel maybe I had that mindset a long time ago, but I don't have that mindset now. So for me, it's a very big problem to be compatible with someone with that mindset, because it's there's levels to this and we're never going to hit that level if everything I know about you is surface level. And I know that everyone obviously is going to have secrets. I'm not saying you tell everyone in your life everything, and there's definitely different friends for different things, but I also think if you want to tell someone everything, that is within your right. But I think also within the same breath, people do get confused with there are some friends that you have that are not necessarily that level you need to get to with them. There's certain friends that you might have for different reasons, and it's not every single friend that I have I would tell the same exact thing, if that makes sense. So I think it's definitely valuable, but I do feel there's a threshold that once we've passed that, it's the bond cannot physically get any closer without me going beneath the surface. I think this all just goes back to the fact that I think some people maybe necessarily don't think friendships are as valuable as others. And actually, I was thinking last night that I think that's because a lot of parents, specifically immigrant parents or ethnic parents, follow this narrative of you should never trust anyone this much, or you should never tell your friends things that happen within your home or within your life, or things should be a secret. But I also think that's due to reputation, and that's due to upholding an image in society that they want to come across as the perfect family. They don't want anybody else to be able to see their dirty laundry. But I think when you have parents that raise you with that mindset of nobody's ever really your friend, then I do see how it can be complex to believe that people are out to get you. Or if you had parents that will constantly say and someone's jealous of you, that's obviously going to lead you to that narrative. That's going to be the first narrative you believe about anyone, about yourself. It's a really toxic idea to believe, because otherwise you would have nobody. And I think friendships, you would never know how much friendship has to give unless you gave your all to it, if that makes sense. When you give your all to a friendship and it's reciprocated, it is one of the best feelings you can have in life, where it's you have that companionship, if that makes sense. But maybe I think this, I'm actually puzzling, making the pieces of the puzzle fit together, because I'm actually maybe I think this is why some people get into bad relationships, or they rush into relationships, or if they're Muslim they get into haram relationships, because I feel they never believe they could get close enough with their friend. They think that only a man or only a woman, whatever, I'm going to speak from a girl's perspective, only a man that they romantically connect with would be able to know things like that about them. I don't know why, but maybe they feel like that's a sacred thing that only happens in romantic relationships. But I think that could also happen in platonic relationships. But I think also a lot of people who jump into relationships, I think it's because they're searching for something you could get in a platonic relationship, platonic friendship, but they've never tried hard enough in platonic friendships where it feels like they have that connection. And so that's why I feel like they're constantly searching for relationships, deeper relationships with the opposite gender, because they feel like that is the way that they're going to feel seen. But you can also feel seen in a friendship if you was just to take a leap of faith. But I think it has to be a reciprocated feeling. I wouldn't sit here and, you know, start telling XYZ to a friend who would never tell me XYZ. I think a lot of people aren't brave enough to be vulnerable. I think it's a very risky place to be. So it's like you have to be super open and confident in yourself to do it, and a lot of people just aren't that way. And I think if they wouldn't know that about themselves, do you know what I mean? They don't know that they're fearful of opening up and things like that. But I don't know, maybe not everything is things that you should tell someone, and you're valid enough to want to keep secrets within yourself. I'm not saying that, like, you know, everything should be shared, but I do think you would be very delusional to think you could be like close friends with someone without sharing like a level of, like, I think it's like emotional availability. I think it just proves that you are emotionally available when you are able to get vulnerable with your friends. But I think it depends also on the longevity of the friendship. Like I said, you wouldn't tell this to a friend that you only have a good time with, or a friend that, you know, you can only see it as being surface level. You wouldn't tell them that because there's just no reason or necessarily no point to it. But I think it's like when there's like a long-term friendship and it's like you guys see this lasting for as long as you guys are hopeful for, then you would have to tell them things about yourself, because they would want to understand you to that level, and I'm sure you would want to understand them on that level. Because it's like, that also comes back to the fact that whenever you're friends with someone, let's say like you're friends with someone for 4 years and you randomly just fall out with them because they believe something about you that is false, essentially. Not that you shouldn't be upset about that, but it's also like, it's just proving the fact that they don't know you well enough. They don't know you well enough because you guys have only ever known each other to the surface point of things. But I think surface level friendships usually just stem from proximity friendships. Like, a lot of people just stay in friends because of an institution that they went to, they grew up together, or they knew each other because of XYZ. And, you know, there's obviously extremes of either side of things. I'm not saying like sit there and trauma bond, because sometimes trauma bonding can maybe feel like you guys have a lot in common, but this is all about the past, so it's not necessarily who you are now. And just because you share the same trauma as someone doesn't mean that you guys have responded to it the same way, and you guys have moved on from it or healed from it or your behaviors from the trauma would be different. So it's not like it can be predictable or it's going to be something that is necessarily the same. It could be, but you know, it's not necessarily guaranteed. I see a lot like on TikTok of someone like coming with a story time of like this bad friendship and this is why you should never trust anyone because your friends are jealous of you and this, that and the other. I just feel like I hate this narrative, because it's like, yeah, you had a bad experience. Who hasn't had a bad experience with friendship? Like, I don't believe that like you can have one and done, because it's like one is like just one. And then it's like, are you gonna suffer for the rest of your life because you're scared, or you know what I mean? It would be kind of like someone being friends with someone and God forbid they pass away, and it's like you're never going to be friends with anyone again. That doesn't make sense, you know what I mean? I know it can obviously feel like that, and I have said like in a past video about the fact that it can feel like when you grieve someone or when death happens, you probably feel like you never want to be that close to someone again because of the pain that you would feel. But then it's like you're missing out on so many memories and so many experiences of happiness and genuine connection by closing yourself off to that. So yeah, I hate the narrative online about it, and it's like, this is why you should never just, okay, you had a bad experience and that's valid, but that doesn't mean that every single person on the planet now with a good friend is now jealous of their friend. No, I couldn't tell you a single one of my friends that I'm jealous of. So I don't think it's applicable to all. So yeah, I would just say like it's definitely food for thought, and you shouldn't be surprised if you're not someone who's able to get vulnerable or dig beneath the surface. If you're having just surface level friendship, you shouldn't be surprised. And also, if you are like someone who jumps into relationships and stays in bad relationships, continues to go back in relationships, you should probably think deeper on like why, you know, because maybe you've never given yourself that chance platonically to be able to feel that connection. You search for it romantically only. Okay, bye.